There we go. Sorry.
So we just start over?
No, I was already recording that anyway. Like I said, it was just the audio part of it. You know, my brain goes all over the place with questions, but the reason that the two of you in particular were very, very interesting to me is I was listening to, and I'm going to say the same thing to him when I talk to him. I was listening to an interview with him from back in March, and the thing that I almost drove off the road when I heard this was the idea that you were working in Virginia. And I don't think, I'm sure you're familiar with Jeff Peckman and the sort of grassroots approach that he's taking and the things that he's trying to accomplish. It occurred to me that this was important because it's one thing to hear about Roswell, New Mexico, or Rendlesham Forest, or all these other places. It's a whole other thing to hear about your own backyard. And I think there's a lot of people out there, whether they're involved in the field or not, who aren't aware that this goes on in their backyard, aren't aware that there's cases in Virginia, that there's... Where are the cases in Virginia coming from? And you know, in a sort of generic sort of a way, who are the people that are reporting these things, and what's happening in the state of Virginia that
well, I'd say
I'm sure people aren't aware of?
Yes, the cases come from really all over. The whole state has been pretty active.
Right.
Considering the geography, I think we're more active than the average state for the square meters or whatever. And we have a lot of activity in central Virginia, Roanoke, Lynchburg area. That seems, just recently, I just see that as a pattern of a lot of people complaining or whatever, that they've had close encounters or they saw something, they're not really sure what happened, there's a jump in time. I mean, there's a lot of people. Just this past week I had somebody call from Roanoke that was really upset. And that seems to be a hot spot. Now, Cameron, where you work, you know, you make your garden. So Cameron Pack is out in Virginia Beach, and he just kind of jumped on the scene about 7, 8 months ago, and he's just coming on strong, a nice young guy with lots of energy. And one thing I, covered, he has the time. You know, he's only, he's a young guy. He's working part-time, and he has the time to devote to really do a good job. He's really stirred up a lot of good information about Virginia Beach. He went to his local police department and said, hey, do you have any UFO reports? Which 99 times out of 100 they're going to say, no, get out of here.
Yes.
But they said yes, and they pulled a file out. And they started sharing with him. And then there were older cases they said he'd have to FOIA for, and so forth and so on. And he went to some other police departments, and it sort of had an organic growth pattern.
Right.
And in so doing, he's met a lot of police officers, and of course Virginia Beach, that whole area is kind of military.
Oh,
but
sure.
he's run into a lot of security people, a lot of military and ex-military people, and ex-police officers and so forth that have had really good sightings. And apparently back in 74, 75, there was a real wave going on in Virginia Beach.
Oh.
And I was not really that aware of that, but he began saying, oh yeah, everybody there says there was a wave, there's a lot of activity. And he uncovered a police officer that had an old Polaroid he took of a daylight disc. Granted, it's a very small object in the sky. Sure. But he's never let anybody analyze it or do anything, and he still won't release it, to have anybody analyze it. So it's hard to work with those kind of cases because they expect you to, escort them to some kind of lab, and they don't lose sight of the artifact, and that's hard to accommodate, obviously. But another thought process we had, I was asking Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who's a good friend of ours. He used to be the main guy from MUFON that looked at, media, digital media, videotape, and still pictures and so forth. Right. And he's basically semi-retired at this point. He moved to Ohio, so he moved out of the greater Washington area. But he played piano at our wedding. He's a good old friend. Oh. And but I did send him a couple cases just on the fly, so don't waste a lot of time, because I know he's retired, and I don't want to bug him. Sure. So, but I did send him, that case got sent to him, and another case where somebody had captured sort of a daylight disc-looking thing. We were trying to figure out what it is. But anyway, there's lots of activity, and once you start scratching the surface, it's of a historical nature, but people will come up with these old sightings and these old pictures, and these old incidents. Right. And it's just very, very interesting stuff. But stuff is going on all the time. If you think that the skies are quiet, they are not. And these people, you asked about the people, so I want to develop that a little bit. Sure. They are from every walk of life. I remember many years ago, I'm talking, gee whiz, it must be 17 years ago, a long time ago, 18 years ago, and I saw on the cover of the Washington Post magazine a guy standing in shadow, with a big shadow hanging out, you couldn't really see his face, and it says a government lawyer with a deep dark secret, and I thought he's an abductee. I just thought that to myself.
Right.
Well, I opened it up, and darn if that wasn't his case, and that was on the cover of the Washington Post magazine. And that fellow, I did not know this because I didn't
I'm
know
sorry,
my
did you say
husband
the
yet.
cover of the Washington Post
Washington
magazine?
Post magazine had that
Wow.
the Sunday paper.
Okay.
And you know, I just had a feeling that that's what he was going to say, because he's
Right.
kind of wistfully looking sort of at the sky, and the sun's in a weird
Right,
angle.
right.
You know, I thought that might be true, and it turns out to be true. And he has since moved out of the area because he got really ridiculed. I mean, the elevators would open in his building, and people would start snickering.
Gosh.
But he was. He did sort of come out, and he did work with the Fund for UFO Research. My husband Robert was he's still the secretary treasurer for the fund. They're not
Right.
as active,
Right.
but at that time it was in full swing, and all kinds of projects were going on.
Sure.
You know, it's kind of funny. Like for a while there, the Center for UFO Studies was in the lead. You know, and that was like the gold standard. They sort of
Right.
had the most. You know, then they started waning, and then at some point the fund kind of took over, and we had a lot of big projects, a lot of money that was invested in UFO
Right.
research, and that went on for quite
There
some
was
time.
one of those projects, and I might as well go ahead and just ask you the same question that I heard your husband mention, the AMP project, the ambient monitoring project?
Yeah, that project is, the monitoring went on about 10 years ago, and
Oh.
you're probably wondering what the heck, you know, or 8 years ago. But when that wound down, it was completely out of money. That was a very expensive project, because
Right.
the instrumentation cost a lot of money.
Sure, of course.
And then when that wound down, we had all this data that was probably subtle data. There was not this huge aha signal.
Sure.
You know, it was subtle data, and that data needs to be looked at by somebody that's, you know, PhD statistician.
He had said the same
That-
thing in
and
the
it's
interview, right?
Quite a massive amount of data
Right.
along many different axes and all that. So it's a big undertaking.
Right.
So I think someone worked on it last summer, but it's one of these things where, you know, you get somebody with the qualifications, and then, you know, they're free for the summer because they're in the academic world. They can take
Right.
a month and sort of do what they can.
Right.
But we're sort of at a standstill there. I know that we were collecting money for that, and everyone's heart is to complete the project and see if there's a subtle signal in there.
Right, right.
But it's interesting.
I spoke to a professor the other night. I'm trying to get into a master's program, and I spoke to a professor the other night about resume building and just experience. And although it wasn't directly connected to this field, the point was gaining experience. And one of the things that I was going to talk to both of you about was the idea of trying to find a way to get new blood into the field, or especially with younger people who are just wandering around looking for opportunities, and especially college students who give you that pat answer of, I don't know what I want to do, or I don't know what to do with myself. It just seems to me, if they knew that the opportunity was there to put some time in, and that they could put it on their resume later and
That's
contribute
right.
some of their effort. And you get, of course, you know, college students, you got tons of intelligent young people running around out there that just don't know what to do with their time and energy. And if we could steer some of them towards the field, I think that would really be a big
Yeah,
boost.
there's anything you want to do is available in the UFO field. I mean,
Right.
Whatever you're, that's one of the problems. That's one of the good things and one of the bad things about
Right.
it. It's a multidisciplinary you know,
Right.
thing.
So you need biologists and
That's right.
physicists and all types of different investigators and journalists and whatever
We
else, right?
once had, it turned out to be probably false, but we had an abductee, somebody we feel that truly was a UFO abductee, who had a piece of metal come out of her nose, and the suspicion was maybe this is actually an implant.
Mm-hmm.
So we went the whole 9 yards with that, with the fund, and you know, it cost like $6,000, but we
Right.
had a retired, he had been a doctor and a pathologist, he also had a PhD in physics,
Right.
and he ran a lab. And the main thrust of it, of what they do, was things for court, you know, so everything had to meet a certain level of.
Of course, right?
Yeah,
I'm very familiar with
he
all
was very,
that type
very
of
good
thing,
about,
sure.
you know, taking the, you know, the case and documenting it properly so that nobody would be concerned about it fell in the wrong hands or whatever.
Right.
So I went through that whole rundown on that. Now, it turned out to be what he considered to be a normal thing in water, such as it was a little bead of metal that had broken off of a pipe, he felt.
Oh.
And, you know, she felt she had been sneezing, and she was washing her hands under the sink, and then it popped out, but he thinks that she just kind of got a little mixed up, that it just came out of the faucet. So that was a situation there, because he wasn't able to find any tissue embedded in
I
it.
see, right,
So, but you know, that's the kind of stuff you have to do if
Right.
you're gonna follow the science.
right.
I do think there are implants, I mean, you know, that we've heard enough about them, and that, I've had some people I really believe in, you know, that have had that, and, I think that that's a real thing, but it's difficult to nail it down.
Right.
But that's another area of research where could really be helped by
Sure,
financial investment in people's time.
I'm sure you're familiar with Roger Lear and some of the work
Yes,
that he's
Roger
done.
Lear. He's a little bit of a swashbuckler, you know, he's a little bit of an entertainer and,
Right.
you know, so forth. But he is somebody that, talk about how complicated it must be to get the operation theater going with the videotapes and
Right.
everybody there.
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of work to coordinate that.
Right.
So you got your hats off to him there. But I think where we've, as a field, where we've kind of dropped the ball is not too many of those things have the scientific study after the fact.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and that's where, you know, as far as that type of project, that's the direction it needs to go in. But,
Right.
you know, you got like Daryl Sims, who they're on again, off again. I think they're off again now, but Daryl Sims is his partner.
Oh,
And he's got like a shoebox of implants, you know, but like that's not helping anybody. You know, we need to get chapter and verse on those
Yeah,
things
sure,
and
sure.
proper handling of
right,
the
of
items,
course,
you know.
of course.
But yeah, so there's a lot to be done. But the way to do things properly is a very costly, you know, time-consuming process. And you know,
Right.
we've always been, the UFO field has always wanted money.
Right.
That is one thing that is a little different now. The Fund for UFO Research used to get quite a bit of money for targeted projects, like I mentioned the AMP project, which was
Right.
they used to be called the Abduction Monitoring Project, but they changed the name to something to accommodate a more open-ended view of things. But that one was very costly, and we had some other projects that were costly. There was a survey that went out with Omni Magazine, back in the day,
Oh.
Omni Magazine,
Right.
and that went out and got a certain amount of data. Some people said it was slightly flawed or this or that, but the point is, you know, it came out with like 2% of people have had a close UFO experience, which is, you know, kind of astounding.
Right.
And so that was a piece of data that came out of that, but that was another expensive project. But now, just to bring it up to speed, I think MUFON now is on the rise. It's kind of eclipsed the other two groups because they have really kind of gone out there and tried to find really practical people for their board and my husband's on the board, but you know, getting really go-getters and people with IBM, people that can build databases.
Sure. Sure.
You know, people that are empowered to really get the ball moving, and I think they've really done a good job. Nobody's perfect, no organization is perfect, but
Sure.
I think they've really done a good job. And now we have this, what they call the CMS system, the case management system, and every time somebody sees something and records it, you know, puts it in the MUFON website, then, you know, emails are generated automatically, and, you know, the troops can be motivated
Sure.
and to go out. And in the old days, it was state director controlling everything.